All right, let's just start off what we talked about the fastest, a minute in 8-man football, offensive philosophies. I think in 8-man football, there's been an idea for years that it's tie-dye, you're going to run the football, and for the most part it was for a long time, and you had a couple teams that would throw the football. When they did, they burn you because you weren't ready for pass. You didn't practice pass coverage that often. But now I feel like we're moving into there's more spread. There's more different looks with offenses across 8-man football.
You can take it, Anthony.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we see that from the best coaches, though. You know, there are teams that kind of get stuck in their ways, and that's the offense they want to run, no matter what the personnel is. And I think the best ones can adapt. I think that's why. I know part of it's because Devin's a homer, but Josh Peterson is great about that. He will change his offense, at halftime, as we joked about before, to whatever fits his personnel. And I think those are signs of what the best coaches in the state is being able to adapt. And I think you see that with the best programs as well, and that's how teams like that are able to be consistently good. Southold is got 10 guys half the time, and they're still one of the tougher routes in that conference, just because of the coaching and the way that they adapt and their schemes and all that. So, yeah.
I mean, even guys like Doug Fountain, who likes to run the power T formation kind of stuff, he's even adapted a little more of the spread as well, getting his athletes in space. I think coaches have realized over the years that the more you can get your athletes in space, and 8-man doesn't matter if it's out of the power I, then getting them to the edge and going, or if it's spreading it out and having one-on-one on the outside kind of deal. Whatever is the best way to get your athletes in space is the way to go with it. And I see more and more spread of the new teams that are in 8-man football than the traditional teams up in the Northwest. I think there's some younger coaches, and I think they're more willing to experiment with some of that stuff and trying new things a little bit. And it looks a little different in certain places. But you also see some coaches who will adapt. I mean, you saw Drexel the last couple of years moving Coffee from a tailback to quarterback, just like Mac Anderson there at Southwest Livingston a few years ago. Before that, just using that similar of, hey, we're going to use, instead of having him line up at tailback and having 6 blockers, we're going to line up a quarterback and he has 7 blockers, and we have the numbers to manage at that point. Just little things like that, I think, is what can separate some coaches there. Just kind of knowing their personnel and just knowing how to gain numbers in the box with that. So that's why I really enjoy. I mean, I enjoy teams that can spread it out and they get their athletes in space a little bit there. But you have to have a guy who can get the ball to them as well, whether it's a quarterback who's accurate, guys who can catch on the outside. So there's many factors that go with it. If you don't have a guy who can throw the ball, you're going to have to be a little more creative with how you can run the ball. And some of that is you can still spread it out a little bit and run out of there. But there's some teams that just can't throw the ball, so they're kind of stuck taking on 7, 8-man boxes, and that's just really tough at that point.
But yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. That's the thing with, I think the spread is you are getting your athletes in space. Because the problem with defense in 8-man is like you're down 3 guys defensively. Where on the offensive side, you're not really missing those 3 guys as much. So you spread these guys out. That just makes it more difficult for the defense. And, that way, unless, most teams aren't, North Andrew, Worth County, where they just have those big guys up front where they can bulldoze. So you spread them out, and that gives you the capability to still be able to run the ball, even if that's what you want to do. If you're not throwing it a lot, but at least, you're smaller linemen, quicker linemen, you're able to get them moving. And by spreading them out, that you can be more successful that way.
Yeah, you can get angles and use your speed a little bit more in those situations, which some teams do really well. I know Archie's got a decent size line, but they're not going to be overpowering like North Andrews, but they do a good job of spreading it out there. McIntyre can sling it a little bit there for them. They have good receivers on the outside, but also when they want to run the ball, they can because he can find a gap kind of deal. And high school football, open field tackling is important in all football, but in 8-man, it's even more important because, as you said, there's not a whole lot of extra support. There's not a safety back deep who can erase a big game's going to go for 20 yards, and 8-man is going to go for 40 or 50 and a touchdown on there. So just that open field tackling and stressing the defense as much as possible in those situations can definitely separate teams in that regard. We see some teams do it better than others.
Devin, you said something interesting earlier about some of the more established is not the right term, but the teams that have been around forever, right?
Mhm.
Northwest Missouri teams, they're pretty not stuck in the ways because it's worked, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you have the Worth counties, the North Andrews, and Worth counties run the football before quite a bit. I mean, Stanberry has some, Mountain City back in the early 2000s. I mean, they would throw the football, but for the most part, it's been by running the football and the state titles will come.
Mhm.
I mean, just historically. So for those programs, and even if it's different coaches, maybe it's hard to move away from that because you still have the big bodies. You may still have those styles, and it's hard to change the whole philosophy if you're having the same success. And, it's like if it's not broke, don't fix it type mentality. While you have some
Mhm.
new teams coming in that try to spread it out, and sometimes it works. Sometimes they come out, they spread it out, and it doesn't work right off the bat
Mhm.
because there's big enough, quick enough guys in 8-man football, defensive fronts that will ruin that for you too.
And I think a lot of that is the coaches are smart. They play their talent, and if you have a big offensive line that you can bully people, why not use that at that same point? Why mess around trying to throw the ball and not being efficient with it? It's pretty much what you're most efficient at. And a lot of these teams, like Rockport and King City and East Ashton, they have decent sized offensive lines. And they're like, you know what? We're just going to pound it at you and see if you can take it and sustain that physicality over quarters. When you have other teams, for example, just Concordia, they run the spread. College Heights is a new program. Teams like that, they don't have the same size up front, so they don't have the same luxury of, hey, we're just going to control the line of scrimmage. You see this a lot in college football over the years. It's a little bit different now since everyone runs the spread. But for a while, it'd be like, hey, Boise State's not as talented as some of these teams, but they're running a little more of a spread option, offense kind of deal there, and they can overcome some of that talent differential with just scheming on the outside kind of deal. So I think eventually it all does get caught up a little bit there in some of the better teams. UCL Worth County kind of spread out a little bit last year as well, and they were very good at it kind of deal with that. So it all depends on the athletes you have, and if you do have enough athletes where you can be the best of both worlds, where you can be a power running team out of the spread, that's whenever you're Southwest Livingston win a state championship. It's whenever I know the Mountain City teams that went back-to-back championships, they were more traditional on there, but they also had 3 guys who would be the best running back on any team in the state that year. So it's kind of a deal like, it made sense for them to just like, we're just going to run 3 plays and see if you can stop it because no one could. Like, it just kind of depends on the team and the athletes you have on there as well.
Well, I think that goes back to too, and I probably have this wrong, but when my dad was coaching, he was an assistant, and I think they had 16 plays total. They was just 8 and 8, and they would just run it left, run it right. It would just be a power counter, and then they have a couple sprint outs that would be just based off of they look the same. That's all they would run. But we go back to the spread stuff, and it's not hokey offense like you said with the Boise State stuff, right? Like that I don't like calling them those like the hokey offenses where you have to disguise things because in 8-man you have to have a quarterback that can get it to the guys too. That's why Pattonsburg was so successful for those few years there with the Wilhite kid too.
Yep.
He was able to get the football to the playmakers, and I think that's why you see some teams stay with the spread longer than others because if the quarterback's under duress the entire time, that goes back to what we talked about with the fastest men in 8-man too about intentional grounding too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got a kid running for his life the whole time. He's not getting it down the field to any one of his playmakers either. So and if you don't have guys up front, you have to go spread almost too.
Exactly. If you look at teams, for example, the difference between North Andrew and Bramer. North Andrew has some big dudes up front. There's no reason for them to go, hey, we're going to spread it out 4 wides and throw the ball. Linville can do it, but there's no reason to kind of do it that way because you can just run the ball at people. Bramer doesn't have that same size. They really don't have any guys who are just like a pure stud running back like Ecker or even Andrew Goff, but they have guys who are quick little dudes who can run routes and catch the ball downfield. And so they're just playing to their strengths kind of deal with that. And I think the teams that can do that the best are the kind of the most interesting to watch on there. And I think the offenses, mainly around the state, are decently pretty good. It's the big differential factor in a lot of these between the good and great teams and the above average to average team is how they play defense. It's really not even about the offense at this point. It's can you get stops, which I know getting stops in 8-man is tough, and that's more about your Jimmys and Joes than anything else on that point. So we'll see how it goes. I know you hate the Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's, but I bring it up every time with that. So
cliche.
I want to
ask
you
guys.
Though.
Fine. Before we get to the this week's poll, I want to ask you guys. We kind of talked about it too, about the philosophy wise. But what formation are you guys starting with your offenses? I know we talked about it a little bit off camera too, but I mean, what is your go-to if you had the right pieces that could run an 8-man offense the way you wanted it to?
See, I think I'd go spread, with a little more run heavy at the 8-man level, and like we kind of talked about too. It's like, well, what kind of players do I have? But if I don't have maulers up front, then yes, I'm going to want to spread my team out and be able to run the ball that way. I think as well, because I think that's the best way to get those guys in space. Unless you're a certain team with a big mauler running back and you're running the spread, like we've seen that's not the way to go. But yeah, I think that's what perfect, and my ideal 8-man offense would be that. But it kind of depends. If you have Will Height and Cameron Jones and Holly and then you're gonna toss it around. So
yeah, you're gonna score 85 points a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm going to cut it down to 60 because I'm not going to kick an onside kick every time.
Play a little bit.
And they're going to play defense.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe keep the possessions down just a little bit there and just be a little more just efficient instead of just having to score mass volume, kind of deal with it. So yeah, I think mine would be kind of a 2-receiver set, one to each side, a tight end probably who's either on the line of scrimmage or maybe just offset a little bit to have that ability for him to actually pull and be a little more mobile with it as well. If you have a good athlete at the tight end, it makes things a little bit better for you. And that'd probably go out of the pistol of some sort on there. That way your running back still has that same downfield running, I think. So I think if you get too much, and we've seen it in the shotgun where the guy just next to you, it's more just snap and hand, and then he has to go. Gets him a little more downhill at the snap as well. So you can also run some read option or some regular option out of his too that Anthony loves as well. On there, gives you a few more options, I think, out of the pistol. I wish more teams would run out of the pistol than just, if they're in shotgun, just running back to the side of the quarterback. I think it gives you just a little more options. The running back can get downhill a little bit better than just, because you get some of that still under center action with it. It's just out of the shotgun.
Wake Forest.
The old Nevada teams with Kaepernick were really good at that.
Yeah, Wake Forest runs that slow mesh. Oh, it's fun. It's fun.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll get you guys out of here on this week's poll, brought to us by Rain Physical Therapy. I feel like I should probably say that more than I. That's probably actually the first time I've actually said it out loud, but probably should say it more since they do sponsor you guys' 8-man poll. All right, here we go. North Andrews still at 1, Archie 2, Albany 3, and there's not much difference. I mean, point-wise, from 1 to 3, not a lot of space. Platte Valley 4, Worth County 5, East Ashton 6, Oryx 7, North Shelby 8, Drexel 9, King City 10. King City had a strong second half against Rockport last Friday, but I think there's one game that everybody's probably paying attention to this week. If not, okay. Sure. I mean, you're going to pay attention to your own game too, but you're also going to look at that North Andrew Albany one because that's going to tell us a lot more than I think anything at this point, right?
I think it's a big one for North Andrews. I think if they can come out and play as well, we think they can on there, and if they win this game by a couple touchdowns or something like that, I think they kind of put themselves as kind of head and shoulders as the team to beat, because we've seen Albany versus Platte Valley and Worth County, and those are two really close games that could have went 50-50 on there. And if North Andrews goes out there and plays really well and controls the game, it's like, well, maybe North Andrews just kind of a head and shoulders above everyone else that we're looking at right now. But if it's a knockout, drag-out fight, it's like, you know what? You got about 5 teams that are all just kind of really close with each other. I think it's a good gauge game for North Andrews. They're probably the best one they've had since their first 2 weeks when they beat King City, then beat LeBlanc, who's not a great matchup for their size kind of deal on there. So this is a team that can kind of match up with them a little bit better. So I'm intrigued to see what Coach Fountain in Albany has there for North Andrews to slow that team down.
Anthony, I want to ask you about that too. You've seen Albany, more than anybody, I think, at this point, just because you've had the good ones. You've had the Worth County and the Platte Valley ones. Is this a matchup where, Kemper Klein, he's an athlete. Is that one of those things where it's kind of like the Landon Gardner that North Andrew faces, where a guy can get out in space, make plays, and North Andrew just has to be physical up front? Or where's this matchup, you think, kind of the biggest for these two teams?
It's going to be the secondary of North Andrew. Last week they said, hey, Stanberry, please throw the ball. Like, go ahead. We'll let you throw it. I think this week's going to be the opposite. And I think with that, that front line that they have, they're able to rush 3 or 4, and then they can drop the rest back. Because as we've seen with Platte Valley and North County, the only way that Albany really moved the ball with success was throwing it. And Burke's been really good. Porter Davis has been good. So they've had success. The one, I guess, complaint I have, watching them is like sometimes Fountain really, really wants to run the football. And at times it stalled the offense against those good teams. So we'll see what they do, because they can't run the ball in North Andrew. I can't see it. I mean, Platte Valley's a good defensive front.
I think they can run the ball, but it's got to be out of the spread where Kemper can go on the fly a little bit there and scramble. It's more of the off kilter runs, not just like, hey, we're going to run the ball here. It's more give him the option to run or pass, whether it's getting him out of the pocket and away from guys like Miller and Chittum who are rushing the passer, or Goff with a blitz kind of deal on there. So I think that's where Albany can maybe exceed there versus North Andrew trying to get to the edges a little bit more with Klein to give him an option to either pass to Davis or to run. It'll be tough because North Andrew does have some speed there on defense as well. They're trying to think of ways that they can exploit maybe some North Andrew's deficiencies on defense. There's not a whole lot of them, but you got to try to figure out where the holes kind of are with that. And it's even tougher now with Eichner back because he's also another really good defender they've added to the mix there for him.
It's the one that you said last week.
I know.
Yeah.
See, and
your favorite
one. The problem with that is like Worth County's got a good front. Platte Valley has a good front. I'm not sure they're at the level of North Andrew. And Klein would, I think was like 15 for 75. And those are against those guys. So I just don't see him. He will get some runs. He got him against Worth County, got him against Platte Valley. But I think if that's their focus is running the ball, then they will get the doors blown off them.
Yeah, that's why I said it's like a run pass option where he gets to the edge, has a chance to throw it, but if it's not there, he can take off and get 5 yards kind of deal. It's less about the run, but that run option is still there, and he's not stuck in the pocket, then trying to avoid 3 or 4 guys kind of deal. I think that's where I was kind of hitting with that. So yeah, not just a straight running. It's gonna be tough.
And they get that. Like talking to Chittum today, he's like, this is about the defensive ends and keeping him contained. It's not so much sacking him, and I think the other teams did a good job of that. You're not bull rushing him. You're kind of just,
pushing the pocket into him.
Yeah.
And kind of playing with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Just kind of keeping it clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other side. Go ahead.
For Albany?
I mean,
their defense is good.
Defense against the North Andrew. I mean, we know what North Andrew's going to do. It's just who's it going to be? But we saw Ecker do it. They can give it to Goff if they need yards. He's going to run right at you. Linville a couple of times on the option at the last second. What was it? The second touchdown of the game against Stanbury last week. The very last second, pulled that out and was like, "Nah, I'll take it." Which tells you, how good he is at kind of reading that too. That he can just take that back out and say no.
Here's where it's interesting to me: is what do you do with Kemper Klein? So like with Worth County, it was like, we're not letting Dylan McIntyre beat us. So you send Klein out there and shuts him down. Now, here's your option. Eichner has been really good since coming back. I think he's got 200 yards receiving in 2 games or something like that. Or do you bring him inside to help with the run? And that's where it gets tricky, because I don't know if Albany has a second cornerback that can kind of contain them. So I think that's where it gets interesting. And I know they talk about Fountain. He will take away whatever you want to do. So if it's A, B, you have to be able to do C. So that would be the interesting part to me, is like how they use Kemper Klein on Friday night, whether you bring him in to help stop the run or you keep him outside.
I have an inkling that they're going to put him inside, try to stop that running game, and maybe Porter Davis to guard him on the outside there. He's got plenty of speed. Let's see. That'd be my guess, to maybe try to force North Andrew to throw the ball, because as good as they are with the Linville-Eichner connection, that running game is elite. So, be my guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would do, but I mean,
we're just idiots. I'm talking about football, so
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm just sitting here listening. I ask questions, and my last question.
Listen, I had to come up with something that was like, ooh, what are they going to do? Of course you're going to.
Here you go. Here's the last one I'll throw at you. I mean, this feels like it's going to be one of those chess match or who's going to blink first between Coach Fountain and Coach Williams, right? I mean, they're both have something planned. At least I think with North Andrews offense, there's something they haven't shown yet. I don't know if it's this week they show it or they wait until they show it. But I mean, this feels like you have two coaching staffs that are winning football. They know how to build the programs. Who's going to blink first? I feel like it's what may happen here. Whether that's just on the field where there's a turnover or a penalty or something has to give, I think, in this one.
Well, and as I saw in the Worth County game, it was Worth County who kind of shot themselves in the foot and got behind a little bit. Now, the next week against Platte Valley is Albany who did that. If either of these teams, if Albany does that again, I think that's a bad deal for them because that's a tough hill to climb if you get behind. And, North Andrew can't do the same. I mean, I think Devin saw that week one. That game shouldn't have been a 14-point game, but turnovers and everything else. So I think that could be the biggest difference. I think if they take care of the ball, there's not a lot of penalties, and I think it should be another pretty good game.
Yeah, if Albany falls behind 2 scores in North Andrew, they might only have 2 possessions left the rest of the game because North Andrew, if they want to, will be like, we're just going to get 6 yards of carry here, drive the length of the field, take up the half the quarter, and then force you to come back in a hurry kind of deal. Then you start pushing, pressing, make mistakes and stuff like that. We've also seen North Andrew turn the ball over a little bit and have some fumbling issues there. So as with most football games, it's going to be the turnover battle. It's going to be a huge – when there's 2 even teams, the turnovers can be the deciding factor here. And it should be a really fun game. I know Albany – another big game at home here for them. I'm sure they're glad to get North Andrew at home a little bit, play on the hill. So it should be a lot of fun there.
Home.
They do have everybody at home this year. It's crazy how that's kind of worked out there for Albany with that. But I mean, it should be a fantastic football game. I do think next week, whoever wins this game, especially if it's in dominant fashion or if they win by a couple of scores, will probably be number 1 in our poll next week.
I sure hope so.
You would think so, but we'll see. You never know with the poll sometimes.
I'll fight the poll. I don't care.
And Albany basically wins the conference.
Yes, they would pretty much clinch the conference. They have King City and Pattonsburg left. So even then, they would at least clinch a share of it, in my opinion, with a win there versus North Andrew. Be heavily favored the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thing is like the pressure is really on North Andrew because
is it?
You can't – boy, I think it's
only the conference.
Albany.
It's only like clinching the conference, but it's also maybe clinching the
districts.
1 seed in districts. Yeah. Exactly on there. Yeah. Because if North Andrew beats Albany, there's still a chance for Worth County to beat North Andrew, and then a giant mess and misses point standings and stuff like that in District 4. So
yes,
I think, which I know you want chaos there, but if Albany wins this game, they can pretty much not only just clinch the conference, but pretty much clinch the 1 seed too, because they'll have tiebreaker wins over Platte Valley, Worth County, and North Andrew. So even if they were to slip up versus King City, they still have those tiebreaker wins, and if they fall behind someone on the points, they still jump over everyone besides East Atchison because they didn't play EA. So, that's just something to kind of keep an eye on here. Albany can take a big step to clinching that number 1 seed in District 4 this week. North Andrew can as well, but they have another big game the following week versus Worth County to cement that.
All right, let's get out of here on this one. Where are you guys at this weekend?
South.
So,
we're both going to Appleton Liberal on Thursday. And then I will be going a little farther less south on Friday night. I'll be doing Warwick and Norman Hardin Central. It'll be Coach Thacker's return to his old school there with the Aggies. With that, so those are 2 games I'm doing this weekend, but also keeping a close eye on another game that's like a top 12 matchup between St. Paul Lutheran at number 8 North Shelby. It's kind of an underrated, decent game this week. It's just really far away.
Appleton City, Lockwood. Watch out.
I mean, okay, yeah. So he's going to Lockwood College Heights on Friday night, so he'll see plenty of. If you want to see some passing attack, he's going to see plenty of passing this weekend. There Friday night.
I was just going to sit there and let him just sit in that for a second.